All right. Welcome to another workshop offered by the University of Kentucky and the Office of Work, Life, and Benefits. Today, we're going to be talking about productivity hacks and work-life management. And our speaker with us today is Dr. Nichole Huff, and she's a professor here at the university, and she works with our Cooperative Extension Services as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Huff, for being with us today.
Thank you, Azetta. I'm eager to get started. Okay, I have the pleasure of presenting for work life, a few times a year, and this is always one of my favorite topics to discuss because it is one that I constantly have to practice myself. And so, I know some of you were active on, as we were waiting to get started, but I'd love some in the chat. Why did you sign up for this webinar? What do you hope to gain from it? And what are some of the things you're looking forward to in this webinar? And I've got the text chat pulled up if you want to engage. Yeah, extra time, work boundaries. I can't put any more time in your day, but maybe I can help you um, come up with some strategies for how you spend your time. And prioritizing is one of those. Yeah, improving our workflow, motivation, productivity, how to get out of a work slump. Oh, covering two high demand positions, maximizing productivity, organization, success and goals, additional skills. And so those are all some of the things that we are going to talk about today. And so we'll kind of hit three main areas. And so how to think of time as a commodity. Strategies to boost your personal productivity, and then ways that we can be strategic with our self-care. And, regardless of if we work in the office or hybrid or remote or on campus or across the state somewhere, or I think there may be people joining us from outside of Kentucky. We're all stressed to manage our time wisely, and because it impacts all areas of our life, and I will hit on some of that. And I laugh because this is an area that I am constantly challenged in, and one that I struggle with, just having a high demand career, being a mom of three. I was joking with the Zeta, not joking, but just laughing because I often quote who I say is my favorite theologian, Jimmy Buffett. If we couldn't laugh, we would just all go insane. It's kind of one of my life mottos because sometimes that juggle is very real. And my youngest son was sent home with a fever today. So I was rushing to sign online because he was sent home with a fever. Can't get him in for a doctor's appointment. So working from home with a little one, and so presenting on work-life balance and productivity just seems apropos for the day. So when I talk to you about these things, know that I'm speaking to you from the trenches of somebody who is trying to put these into practice while maintaining my physical health and mental health and the health of my relationships and my productivity on the job front. And so, with productivity and discipline. It is all, it's a muscle. Discipline is a muscle that we have to exercise in terms of our productivity, just like our health or exercise habits or sleep routines or anything else, any area of our lives, our finances, but where we may have to exercise discipline. Time management is also a muscle that has to be exercised. Okay, so as Etta mentioned, that I work with our cooperative extension program, specifically Family and Consumer Sciences Extension. I'm the state specialist for family finance and resource management. And so, finances, of course, is one of the resources that we manage that is vital for our livelihood. It's often why we want to be productive because our productivity can be tied to our finances. There are many, many other resources that we juggle that are important for our vitality and our wellness. And so these can be our time, our energy, our relationships, our health, our finances, our resources. This little toilet paper stands for, but those are our home, our clothes, our shelter, and then just all of the other things in our lives that keep us running. And so, what are some of the things that you are currently juggling? What are some of those demands that you're juggling? And it's those demands that often stall our productivity. So now I know that I will also be working from home with the little one tomorrow because he can't go back to school for 24 hours after being fever free. So I know that that is a demand that will stall my productivity tomorrow. Aging, amen. Making time for friends, or caring, so being a caregiver, yes. Working personal life, deadlines hitting at the same time. Yeah. And so we all have different demands, and those demands can look different at any given time of a day. I was reading some research recently talking about yeah, I'll give my age. I'm in my 40s and the stress level and how that's one of the hardest decades because you are often in that sandwich generation that you're a caregiver, typically for children and maybe for parents or other loved ones as well. And then you're in the prime of your career, but and how hard that is, but then as aging demands on your mind and body, and I felt seen in that research article, and some of you from the text chat I think are feeling that as well. And so I like to say that when we think of work-life balance, that this scale that you see on the screen, I think that it is a myth. I think that having this idea that your work life, that the scales will be balanced between your work and life is often an unrealistic expectation. What I think is a more realistic expectation is to instead look at it as work-life management strategies. So, what are some strategies that you can implement that keep your scales balanced over time? And so, there are some days where, like today, where my scales are going like this at the same time. And then next week, I will be abroad with a work trip. And so that will be a time where my work is going to be prioritized. I'll be out of the country. And so that is, where that scale will be more weighted. And as I prepare for that departure, my life is, elevated. And over time, depending on the needs in my work and my home, is there balance over time? And so balance doesn't always mean every day is going to look balanced, but over time, am I implementing the work-life strategies and management, and boundaries was a word that came up in the chat, but that will allow me to make time for the things that matter, both on the work front and the home front, but also that so that I can sustain physical health, mental health, all those aspects of health in 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 my life. Because part of why productivity and boundaries and work-life management strategies are important is because it helps us avoid professional burnout. And so the World Health Organization defines burnout as chronic stress in the workplace, that is expressed as energy depletion or exhaustion, negative feelings towards your job, or it could be apathy, right? It may not even be negative feelings. It may be the absence of feelings. You're just kind of, apathetic towards your job. And then reduce professional productivity. And we're going to talk about it. There's a difference between productivity and busyness. There's a difference. We may be very busy and have little output to show for it. But when you're not productive, despite your busyness, it can add to this stress that can lead to burnout. When workers have poor work-life balance, their stress levels rise. And we know that when stress levels rise, it makes it hard for us to concentrate. There's some studies that say that an average employee is only engaged about 15% of the time at work. The rest of the time is spent doing trivial tasks or being distracted or being wasting time. I think that there are many ways that we can account for the rest of that percentage. And when we're stressed, it can also weaken our immune system. And so when workplace stress takes a toll on our health, it can affect our professional stress and vice versa. These skills can go both ways. But stress can lead to anxiety, depression, insomnia, and then there's cyclical effects from that, right? And so if we didn't sleep well, we're even less productive the next day, which contributes to our physiological stress levels. And so, what we'll talk about, over the rest of our time together is how we can buffer some of the stress, how we can buffer the stress. So while increased productivity is important, not at the cost or expense of burnout and stress, but instead where you feel like you are using your time wisely. And I plug this on the first screen, but a lot of the things that I'm mentioning come from a curriculum that we authored with FCS Extension called Time Well Spent. It is, are you spending your time in a way that serves you and the goals you have in your life, both personally and professionally? Because we don't want to work around the clock either. That's not healthy. And so where can we strike that balance over time? All right, so I love this quote that we should use time as a tool and not a couch. So time isn't something that we lean against to let it pass, that we use as a crutch, but that we can use it as a tool to achieve, our goals. And we all have the same amount of time in a day, right? We have different demands on our time, but how we spend our time and it's largely up to us. And seeing time as a commodity, right? So commodities like money, like resources, they're tangible things that are finite. We have a finite amount of time in a day, in a week, in a month. And if we see time as a commodity that we can invest, just like our money, our retirement, like I always a joke, I love my job, but I do want to retire someday, right? So I want to make the financial investments now that will allow me to do that down the road. The same thing is true with my time. I want to make sure that I am investing it wisely so that it produces a return that will help me achieve my goals personally and professionally. And so there is a big difference in busyness and productivity. And so when we are productive, we are making strides towards a goal. Now that can be a workplace goal, a personal goal, but we are spending our time and we are having things to show for it. I mean, I've got a definition on the next slide, but that will it's intentional. Right. Whereas busyness, we can pass our time in lots of ways. We can be busy scrolling social media. We can be busy running children around or going to the grocery store or, working a job or several people may have more than one job. And so our time can be spent in many ways, but that we always don't have time to things to show for it. So it can also be spent service or volunteering. We could be doing great things with our time, but is it helping us achieve the goals that we need to achieve? And again, can we use our resources and time being one of those, but our energy, our relationships, our finances, how can they work together to move us forward? All right, and so this idea of productivity, which, like I mentioned, is using time efficiently to work towards completing intentional tasks. So we are intentional with our time and it moves us closer to a goal that we have set or a task that we need to do. We are being productive. Procrastination is the opposite of productivity in many ways, which can, be defined as delaying a task or several tasks that should be prioritized. Now, I won't ask for a show of hands, but if we were in person and I ask for a show of hands, many of you would probably say that procrastination is an enemy of your productivity as well. It is something that I struggle with greatly. And learning the reasons behind procrastination can help us improve productivity because it can help us get at the why. And so, our propensity to procrastinate usually stems from four things that you can ask yourself. And so, if you're a habitual procrastinator, um, examining the cause can help you combat some of that. And so, what research tells us is that procrastination is a coping mechanism. And I am someone that, I'm just predispositioned to anxiety. It's something that I manage. And me putting in place these strategies help me manage my anxiety. But I know at the heart of it, when I procrastinate, it's oftentimes I'm trying it, it's my body's way of managing some of that anxiety. And especially so if you are prone to perfectionism or anxiety, know that procrastination, it can be misconstrued as a sign of laziness, but it is often a symptom of an underlying emotional or physical need. So, emotional procrastination, this may be when you procrastinate because you feel very overwhelmed, or maybe you feel frustrated or bored with the task. Maybe you're anxious about the end result, or you feel insecure. Imposter syndrome is very big in academia, but you feel insecure about your ability to complete a project successfully. And so, what your body does is you procrastinate on it because it will allow you to put off feeling those emotions a little longer. Again, coping mechanism. Physical needs often can also lead to procrastination. And so, if you don't sleep well, you're not going to be productive the next day. If you're hangry, you may not be very productive. You may not be able to focus on that task on your computer because your body needs lunch, or you didn't have breakfast, or you haven't drank water all day long. That you're maybe running off of coffee and your body's feeling a little dehydrated. Or maybe, maybe you have a cold. And when we have a physical need, it can cause us to just view our task with a fog. And so and it's difficult when we have a physical need to put forth the energy that we need to prioritize our task. And so I like the acronym HALT, HALT. So hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. And so if you find yourself procrastinating, halt what you're doing and ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I angry? So is there an emotional? It may not be anger, but is there an emotion that I'm feeling? Am I lonely? Right? And so workplaces, whether you're in an office, in a cubicle, behind a computer, working from home, when we are engrossed in a task because we need to get our job done, but sometimes the workplace can be lonely as well. Or maybe you're tired, but is there a physical reason that, or an emotional reason that is halting your concentration? And like I mentioned, this is all forms of procrastination. And so, if you guys have heard of the coping mechanism, fight, flight, or freeze, that response, procrastination is our mind's way of freezing. And, that response, our stress response, our ancestors, they may have been chased by, I don't know, a lion in the wilderness, right? But our bodies consider an email that's causing us stress as stressful on our physiological state as our ancestors may have seen a wild animal in a forest. And that's not a healthy way to move, through. And so your body will often procrastinate, even subconsciously, as a means of protecting you from something that's causing you stress. If you've got a big project or emails or anything that you're procrastinating on, it could be a form of protection because your body's registering something subconsciously as danger. And then finally, the last bucket that I'll touch on is maybe you're procrastinating from uncertainty. So, if you don't know, like if a task is unclear, if your role is unclear, if a deadline is open, that gets me too. If a deadline is open, I will push that thing off. If I don't have a finite deadline when somebody needs something from me. Um, you know, and that could also be, and that's the easiest. Sometimes uncertainty is the easiest to resolve because if you're not sure what your role is, go to a team member, go to a supervisor. If the task is unclear, see if you can get instructions on what is expected of you and when it is expected so that you can begin to break down those responsibilities. All right, and so we'll talk about a few things that we can do to help us again promote that work-life balance and management strategies, but also to help us use our time more wisely so that we can be more productive. And at the heart of this is creating routines. Creating routines, and routines help us from um, a mental perspective as well because our bodies our minds like to know what's coming. It reduces stress and anxiety that is caused by ambiguity and a chaotic schedule. It's why children operate on a schedule, right? Like if you go into an elementary school classroom, there's going to be some picture calendar that says at 8 o'clock is circle time, and this is when snack is, and this is when math is, and this is lunch, and this is rest time, because it helps promote um, well-being in that classroom and order. The same is true for adults. We need routine as well. And there's something to be said for novelty, which I'll touch on at the end of our session. But by and large, if you don't have routine set up in your life, your mind and your anxiety and some of that is inhibiting your productivity could be because you're trying to juggle too much at one time. Whereas if your body knows these routines are in place, it really does help with order and with reducing our mental stress. So we know just three personal routines that to prioritize creating are sleep routines, meal routines, and exercise routines. And so sleep, getting some sleep, and I struggle from insomnia, and aging does not help with that. And so prioritizing my sleep is I have to be extremely intentional. Many of you may let your sleep sacrifice because you're working after hours to balance things, or because that's the first me time you've gotten all day long. And so you don't want to go to bed because when you wake up, you got to do it all over again, right? Groundhog Day. And so sleep and not prioritizing a healthy sleep routine really impede our productivity. All right, and so if you're watching this live, we're recording during the lunchtime hour, and that's probably some of you might be eating while you're watching or not eating at all and working through your lunch break. And so you may, especially on the workplace, you probably don't eat breakfast or eat it on your drive to work or in your carpool pickup, or you skip lunch, or you may eat it on the go or at your desk, or watching a TV show or watching your phone or scrolling social media, but not having established meal routines. Even as a family, our family life is often very chaotic, and it's hard to sit down like we did generations ago around and having a set time around a dinner table. But stopping to eat and prioritizing what we eat and how we eat, it impacts our minds and bodies need that break. We're if we connect it with social connections, whether coworkers or friends or family members, but really elevating the mealtime so that it becomes part of the routine that contributes to our self-care. So that way, when lunch hour is over, for example, we can go back to work because we've taken a break, not work through it. And then exercise routines. And so it doesn't, maybe your schedule, doesn't allow you to go to a gym before work or after work, but maybe it's just getting up from your desk and walking around your building or walking around campus or walking around your neighborhood as when you get home, walking the dog. It doesn't have to be a lot, but do you have some kind of routine built in for exercise? Because we know that that promotes creativity. Like if you are a walker, some of your work ideas might come to you while you're walking because you're detached from your work and you're allowing your endorphins to flow. You're getting fresh air. You're having movement, which promotes creativity and thought and stress reduction and whatnot. Right, some professional routines that are important to create, and these you also can do these at home as well, but that really helps set you up for success. So, prep routines are this might be. Um, Tidying up your workstation before you leave the next day so that when you come in, you're not coming into yesterday's mess, but you're coming in ready to start the day afresh. It may be setting out some things that you need for the task. So if you know you're going to come in and have a project to work on, put that forefront on your desk. Maybe before you go to bed at night, lay out what you're going to need to wear the next day. If you need to iron it or steam it or wash it, but that you identify that the night before to reduce the stress the next day, and having family members do this as well to just create a more seamless workflow. Maybe preparing your work bag ahead of time, filling up your water bottle ahead of time. But are there things you can do as part of perhaps your wind down routine at night to help prep you for the next day? Production routines are very similar. So, are these routines you can implement to increase your productivity or output? So, gathering those supplies, batching like tasks together. Um, let's see, like if you're running errands that in locations together, or if you need to get up to go run something to a coworker, you use the restroom and fill your water bottle or whatever while you're up. You take care of those things so you're not getting up and sitting down and getting up and sitting down, but that you are batching your routines, but you're creating some routines that will promote work rather than promote distraction. Pause routines are very important. And so we are not meant to look at a computer screen all day long or to really to think all day long. It's hard. And so sometimes I am so exhausted and all I've done is think all day in front of a computer. And but I'm not making time to pause, getting up, getting a coffee break, getting a water break, getting Diet Coke, if that's your guilty pleasure, stretching, going for that quick walk, getting some fresh air, taking a lunch break. Are there pause breaks in your professional routine that are intentional? Because that's when, so if you do scroll social media, do you have times where you do that? So maybe, like 10:30 in the morning, you're going to give yourself 15 minutes. You're going to get something to drink. You're going to get up. You're going to stretch. You're going to get some fresh air, and you let yourself check social media. When that's up, you go back to working. But it will give your mind the novelty it needs to focus on your task if you've built in times to pause or briefly chatting with colleagues too. And that can be a large distraction, but it's important that you have it in your day so that when it's time to work, your brain focuses on work because it knows there are some pause breaks and there are some play breaks. And so those play routines are important. Are you taking your vacation time? Are you creating routines where you have fun, where you make time for friends and family and to laugh and do things that you enjoy? And it can scheduling vacations, scheduling intentional time for self-care our body knows when a weekend is in sight, for example, and it needs that. And so these are routines. If routine is an area in which you struggle, I would suggest that you take a look at the routines that are in place, what's working, what could be tweaked. And if routines aren't in place, you kind of assess those gaps. What are some simple routines that you can put in place and just see how they work until they become a habit, and then you can habit stack. Okay, and so with that, organizing our time is another strategy. And it sounds simple, but if we're not careful, our time will pass and we won't know where it went, right? And so um, we can eliminate, delegate, communicate, automate, and consolidate. And so, but consider how are you organizing your time? And so with the first one, what shouldn't or couldn't you be like what shouldn't you be doing? Are there things you can eliminate or delegate or outsource? And so this is both at home and in the office, but there are tasks that you maybe shouldn't be how you're spending your time. Maybe they're sucking your time and your energy and that you need to eliminate them. Maybe that you can delegate something to a team member. If it's at home, you've heard me present before. You know that I have a couple of teenagers and I love this stage of parenting in which I can delegate things to them. It is a perk of having teenagers in the home that I didn't realize how much I would appreciate because it helps our household run more efficiently when everyone pitches in. And that requires communication. And so, are you communicating with colleagues, supervisors, your family members? We get frustrated sometimes when people don't read our minds because we didn't clearly communicate our expectations or our needs, or our time constraints. And so, for example, we have a rule in our home. If it's not on the shared calendar, it might as well not exist. And so it's how our family of five, the four oldest of us, my youngest is not on that one, but he will be. But we put his appointments and engagements on there. And so that shared calendar is one way that we communicate with each other, and we all know to check it before, like my older kids know to check it before they even ask permission to do something, because if it's on the calendar, it gives them an idea of what we'll do that day. And so the same is, you know, but communicating is really important for organizing your time and tempering your stress. In that respect, are there things you can automate? Setting reminders, using technology to work for you. And so maybe there are alerts on your phone, alerts in your calendar. Can you automate prescription refills? And, when you take an animal to the vet, go ahead and schedule that next appointment. What things can you automate in your life? Maybe grocery orders or automated delivery services. What are some things that you can do? Slow cookers, dishwashers, coffee makers. We can make technology work for us oftentimes to get some of our time back. And then consolidating. And so really, how can you simplify this goes back to eliminating, delegating, but how can you simplify things? We overcomplicate a lot, and that's the clutter in our house. The less stuff we have in our house, the less stuff we have to clean and manage and maintain, and it reduces our clutter, which gives us some time back if we're not cleaning. I mean, those are, but think about that in your office, in your time, like in your workspace. Where are the places in your life that you can consolidate, that you can reduce the number of things, or people or tasks that are vying for your time and your energy? One tool that I like to use when I am prioritizing tasks is the Eisenhower matrix, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It's fancy here on the screen, and you will receive a copy of these notes. But it's just a simple quadrant. I often work deadline to deadline. I stay in that first quadrant, and that's how I prioritize my to-dos. What is coming first? That has a deadline that I need to adhere to. And that gets my energy. And then I schedule around those things really paying attention, to the things in my life that I can eliminate or delegate. And delegation can be hard, and maybe you're a team of one. Maybe you are on the home front, you don't have a teenager to delegate things to. Maybe you're a single parent. Maybe you are caring for, a loved one, and you are the caregiver. And so it may be harder to delegate. And that's where you can look at, are there ways to outsource? Are there community resources you can tap into? What are some ways to help you prioritize your task? And so, when you have a minute, go through your task, draw, get out a sheet of type and paper. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just draw a quadrant and begin to identify, where do your tasks fall, and how it can help you know where to focus, know where to start. Okay, so minimizing distractions is another way to get a little bit of time back in your day. A lot of things vie for our attention, and some of those things are in our control. If you have the ability to protect your schedule, protect your schedule. That means, scheduling meetings on the same day. That's one of my biggest strategies. I try to leave a couple of days without meetings, and then I stack them. And so one day I might have five back-to-back meetings or Zooms, but then that means the next day I've left it protected in my calendar so that I can actually do the work and the tasks that were assigned to me at all those meetings. Because if I don't work well with compartmentalized time. So if I've got a meeting and I have an hour in between, I'm probably not going to do a whole lot with that hour. I will spend it talking to a colleague. I will go down the email rabbit hole. I won't use that time efficiently. Whereas if I can block either a morning or an afternoon or a full day, if I'm really lucky, but if I can protect some uninterrupted time on my calendar, I can mute my notifications. I can allow myself enough time to get in a flow state so that I have time to focus on a task. And so saving your schedule, putting yourself on your schedule too. And so blocking time for your appointments, your walking, your this, your lunches. But take a look at your schedule, and is your time protected? And are you someone who works better with large batches of time? And where can you get that time back in your calendar? Same is true for weekends. Like, are you giving yourself enough unbooked time to actually recharge for the upcoming week? Escaping emails. Email is a huge rabbit hole. And we are in a society that really we can check email all the time, and we expect immediate response from someone. And email is not an emergency. It is not. And so if you can realize that, set times, I have several colleagues who have it on their email signature. My working hours may not be the same as your working hours, or please expect, thank you for your response. Please expect, up to 48 hours for me to respond. Or set time at the beginning of the day, the end of the day, but just dedicated time to check email so that you're not constantly on email and not getting anything else done. And then social sabotage, like, do you spend a little too much time chatting with coworkers where you're not getting tasks done, or on social media? While it can be a great pause break, are we doing it too much? And that can be it's a catch-22, right? In offices, you want to build relationships, but you also need to get your job done. And the same thing with social media. It could be a nice brain break, but it can also be a rabbit hole that can take away from our productivity. Okay, so we'll have to kind of I'll hurry through these next tips so that we can talk a little bit about self-care as we wrap up our time together. But just some more tips for managing your task. How are you tracking your task? So I track mine on my calendar. I have a calendar. My calendar is coded that's on my phone, so I can see yellow is family, and blue is personal, and red is work, and purple is are the task I need to do. And so if I complete one, I delete it. If I don't make it on that day, I put it in my next free block of time. That's how I track mine. Maybe you like a to-do list where you can cross it off. A productivity journal, a bullet journal, a calendar. But how are you tracking your time so that you can account for how your hours were spent, which is why I like to use my calendar. But it also makes me aware of how many hours I have to get things done because my mind will tell me I don't have time to do it. My calendar will tell me, well, you do. You just have to use your time strategically. Deconstructing big tasks. When tasks feel overwhelming, break it down, start small, start somewhere, break it into little mini tasks, deconstruct it so it doesn't feel as big. Batching things, which is something I mentioned before. I tend to batch my meetings, I batch my errands. It it helps me if I lump things together to be make strategic use of that time. And then targeting task. I will assign a task to an hour. This is the hour that I am working on this project. I put it in the calendar and so that it is a reminder to myself. But if you have 30 minutes, what can I accomplish in 30 minutes? Targeting task also, if you're wondering why there is a frog on the screen, if you have heard of the suggestion to just eat the frog, like imagine if you had to eat this frog, you would probably be grossed out, right? And I don't know what life circumstances would dictate that you actually have to eat a gross frog, but just go along with the hypothetical. Delaying it isn't going to change how gross this task is, how undesirable, how like unappealing this task is. You just need to get it done. Sometimes you just got to do it. You just start your day and swallow your ugliest frog. Go ahead and eat that frog and ask yourself, what are some things I could do to make this, I am not a frog person, okay? But if I were to, I don't know, like frog legs, I imagine would taste a little better than this slimy live thing. There are things you could do to the frog to make it tastier, where our tasks are the same way. What are things you can do to that task to make it better? Maybe it's putting on music, or if I'm at home, I'll light a candle. If I make sure my blinds are open so that I'm having natural sunlight. Like I might go if I'm having a meeting, especially those meetings that really should have been an email. I always make sure I'll have my cup of coffee, and so at the very least, I'm going to enjoy my coffee during that meeting time. But that is a way that I can make that frog tastier. And so sometimes we just have to get it done. But if there are things you can do to improve the way and reframe the way your mind sees that, so it can become more enjoyable, it really can take some of the stress away from that task. All right, and then so we'll kind of wrap up with just how to prioritize self-care both personally and professionally. Because our ability to care for ourselves, it promotes our work-life balance and feeling like you have a balanced life. It promotes our stress reduction. It buffers burnout, especially professionally. And so there are 6 tips here just kind of on the screen. Practicing gratitude. And so that goes back to reframing things like, what is going right for you today? And sometimes it's just breathing in and reminding myself that there is breath in my lungs and that I can do hard things and I can am thankful for that breath. But gratitude journals, there's a lot of research behind if you journal at night. If you practice gratitude, if you make a list of 3 things or 5 things that you're thankful for in that day, or people that you're thankful for, that it can reduce insomnia, that it can promote wellness. Engaging your mind, crafts and hobbies that are not related to your work are great ways. Reading, promotes physiological self-care. Hobbies, coloring reduces our stress. Sudoku puzzles, word crosses, like learning something new, downloading Duolingo and learning a foreign language, but are there ways you're engaging your mind? Because this keeps our mind sharp as we age, but it also introduces the novelty that's good. So, like novelty from sporadic days, not good, but novelty from engaging your mind in new things that create pathways in your mind, that's a good thing. Centering yourself. So you could, this is what do you do to refocus when things get chaotic? And this can include exercise, meditation, prayer. It can include social engagements. But what do you do to bring yourself back to your center when things feel? And it doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe it's yeah, getting that cup of coffee, going for that walk with your dog, like something, going breathing in fresh air. It can be something simple, and oftentimes simple strategies to center yourself are more realistic because you can do that when your day gets really really tough. Embracing your emotions, and so that means you know allowing yourself to feel what it is you feel. And so if you're stressed, maybe you need to talk to a colleague. Maybe you need to talk to a mental health provider. Maybe you need to have a have a good cry. Like we, as a society, sometimes don't do that enough, where we try to mask through our day, and it leads to burnout, or we don't feel our emotions until we blow up. And so, are you allowing your body to laugh, to feel, to cry in ways that are healthy outlets, and then recognizing when you need to talk to a professional. Are you being body conscious? And this goes back to that HALT acronym. Are you listening to yourself when your body is telling you you're tired, or you're hungry, or you have a cold, or if you, especially if it's impeding your productivity, like, are you listening to your body? Are you trying to push through? Which in the end, if we don't listen to our body will force us oftentimes to listen. And so that is a way we can practice self-care. So self-care doesn't always mean, going for a massage or a manicure. I mean, it could just be taking a nap on a Saturday afternoon because you've had a really busy week. It just listening to your body and making sure um, that you're being mindful. And then socializing. Again, have fun, laugh. We weren't meant to go through this world alone. And since the pandemic, and it's been 6 years, crazy enough, but we are still experiencing an isolation epidemic, and we are not as social as we were before the pandemic, and it is showing in people's mental states, and that um, can be important to our personal self-care. And then in that regard, professional self-care is also very important. And so, are you doing things to fuel your craft? So that's like engaging your mind, but it's staying sharp in your field, attending workshops like this, attending professional conferences, reading books that help you keep up to date, or journal articles, or whatever it is. Like listen, listening out for how your craft is changing, and so that you're on the cusp of that. And it's what interests you in your field, right? And so what interests you, and how can you fuel that? Maybe it's going out with a colleague and having brainstorming sessions. But what are some things you can do that keep that joy in your job that brought you to it in the first place? Establishing clocking out routines. This is really important if you work from home, or if you tend to work in an office and then come home and still work. But how are you signaling to your body that it's time to stop the workday? So maybe you're changing out of your work clothes into comfy clothes. Maybe you're going for a walk on around your neighborhood. Maybe you listen to a certain Spotify playlist on your drive home. But what is the clocking out routine that can signal to your body and your mind that you're done, and you can actually allow yourself to unwind? Recognizing stress, this goes back to a lot of what we're talking about, but if you're feeling the signs of that chronic workplace stress, are you seeing it? Like, do you recognize it before it blows up? And are you listening? Are you communicating? Communicating is an important part of practicing self-care. And so if you're got things going on at home, are you communicating that with a supervisor or with your team? If are you communicating because we don't have to handle as much alone as we choose to handle, and just practicing good communication skills can often alleviate our stress as well, because miscommunication, whether it's at home or at work, can cause a lot of stress. And then are you taking time for yourself? Some of those pause and play. I think research 60%, I think research estimates that nearly 60% of Americans do not use all of their vacation time. And so we have it, but are we using it? Are we using it? All right, so I'm almost at time. This is something that I like to talk about, just kind of at as you are looking to juggle. If you think back to that first image from the slideshow, we're juggling a lot. And we have to priority juggle. So if you imagine every different task you juggle is either a rubber ball or a glass ball. All right. And so if we were to drop a rubber ball, it would bounce. It's fine. I can let this go. This is not a priority. But some of our priorities, they're glass. If I were to drop it, it might shatter. It might be a relationship or a deadline that I can't get back. It might be a sick kid or a sick parent. At that time, that's your glass ball. So when you're juggling all those things, ask yourself, all right, is this glass or is this rubber? Because if we're not careful, we're going to drop all of our balls. And so you have to decide which one is it okay to let fall, or to sit down, and then which one may be a little harder to put together. And then if you are sinking into do's, you know, find a way to center yourself, to calm yourself, do a brain dump, create a list, do a brain dump, so that you can see what it is. Then you can use some of those priority strategies to figure out what you need to do first, and identify those main concerns. You can only do so much. So, what's your main concern for the day? Find times to add the other things. If it doesn't fit, that's when you can communicate, delegate, outsource, eliminate, or say, hey, I'm not going to be able to meet this deadline, but I can get it to you in 3 days, or I can get it to you next week. And then just start. The best way to get something done is just to begin. If we just jump in, it will often snowball our momentum. And then not forget to communicate. If you're truly sinking, especially at work or at home, but talk to a supervisor, talk to a trusted colleague, talk to a professional. If it's okay to communicate when we're not okay, and oftentimes we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to admit that we can't do it all. And so thank you for your time. We are at the end here. I have a few minutes to, if there are any questions or comments, happy to entertain those. And just remember that, like the other disciplines in our life, our commitment to productivity, it requires planning, it requires effort, and it requires lots of recalibration. So thank you for your time.